Welcome to One on One with the Grim One. I am your host, the Slayer of Posers, Master of Disaster, the most electrifying man in corpse entertainment, the Necrosexual! And joining me on this hellacious chat, we have a man who is one of the hardest working ghouls in the horror business. Welcome, Matt Harvey!
Howdy, thank you for having me. I don't have as impressive an intro as you. I feel kind of underwhelming, but thank you for having me. It's stoked to be here.
Well, Matt, you're a man who needs no introduction. You've been bringing the gore metal to the masses with EXHUMED, as well as other projects like Gruesome and Decapitator, one of my favorites. My grandma loves Decapitator.
Actually, that was my grandma's favorite band of mine.
Right? Grandmas love One Shot, One Kill. You know, it's just one of those classics.
I remember actually my grandmother was a piano teacher. She's deceased now. But anyway, and, you know, she would always be like, oh, what are you working on, this and that? Like, what are you playing? And I remember her playing the Decapitator record one Christmas. And she's like, oh, I really like this bit. Here is like quite good. It's a good harmony, this and that. And my dad came in and he's like, what the fuck are you listening to? What is this shit? And she turns, it's Matthew's band, and it's very good, David. It was so fucking hilarious.
Listen to the melodies.
Right. Oh, they're in there, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, it's great to have you with this morbid talk. In spite of the world being a heaping trash fire, it's great for metalheads to meet up and talk about metal, which is a very passionate subject, and I think all of the best bands out there have learned from the masters. And this is One-on-One with the Grim One. So that means that each week, my special guest selects one record that holds a place in their black hearts. So Matt, tell us a little bit about this record you selected.
The record that I selected, I've submitted a few, but I'm glad we settled on this one. The record I selected is, simply put, the greatest thrash metal debut album ever recorded. It's better than Kill 'Em All, Show No Mercy, Fistful of Metal, Killing Is My Business, Endless Pain, whatever you can name. This is the top debut album, and that is Haunted by Blood by the one and only Exodus. It's a record that, it's a band, it's a rare case when a band is fully formed doing their first album. Usually it takes them a couple records to get their sound. Not in this case. It's just like right out of the gates, everything great about thrash metal, nothing shitty about thrash metal. Perfect.
Someone's gonna die, and that someone is you! You do it better than I do. But indeed, and you touched on one of my questions right off the bat, and I am also of the mind that I think this is the greatest debut album of that whole first wave of thrash metal and thrash metal in general.
Yeah, I mean, it really, like, it just sort of, like, takes no prisoners, and, like, there's tons of great debuts in that first wave of thrash. I mean, I like all the records I just mentioned. It's not this on any of them. But, you know, like, Killing Is My Business sounds terrible. Like, the guitar tone is super thin. The drums have no balls whatsoever. Kill 'Em All, they haven't really, like, found their songwriting thing. They have, like, songs like Four Horsemen is about 3 minutes too long. They have a bunch of sort of leftover songs from when Mustaine was in the band. Slayer isn't quite like Slayer until Hell Awaits. You know, Show No Mercy is great, and it's got tons of great stuff, but it's not like, the band doesn't fully have their own sound yet. Same thing with Fistful of Metal. It sounds more like your typical speed metal record of the time, you know. And then, like, the European debut records are super ferocious, but they don't have the finesse. They don't have good recording. They don't have good playing. You know, Endless Pain sounds like what it is. It's like a bunch of teenagers who've been playing their instruments for like a year and a half and have a ton of energy and good ideas, and then it's just sort of farted out there. Whereas Exodus has like the total package of the songs, the style, unique vocals, really good instrumental performances by, you know, specifically the H team and Tom, especially
the third H.
Holt, Hunold, and Hunting.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like a really satanic law firm.
I love that. But yes, the two H's and then also the third H delivering the beats, Tom Hunting, not to be overshadowed by the Axemen.
Also, I'm from the Bay Area, so it's extra special for me. Even though I am getting up there in years, I was way too young to be into Bonded by Blood when it came out. I was like 9. So I didn't even start going to shows until I was like 13. And the first show I ever saw was Anthrax, Exodus, and Halloween in 1989. And, and in Oakland. And it was just fucking total insanity, like complete, especially when you're like a little shrimp just getting shoved around. It felt like, somebody threw me in a fucking dryer, chucked me out and hit me in the face.
You learned about the toxic waltz firsthand, baby. Well, that sounds like one hell of a way to pop your heavy metal cherry.
It really was. It was like, it really was good, friendly, violent fun. And like, everybody was intense, but everybody was cool, like they saw I was just like a little kid. Nobody was like being too gnarly. People But by the time I sort of got involved in the scene, the album had already rightfully ascended to sort of like mythical status where I grew up. So
when you were going to school in the Bay Area, did they teach you about that album in class?
No, you heard about it in between class. Like you'd see like the cool kids who were like a few years older, especially because the junior high I went to, there was the high school right adjacent. So there was like sort of like a weird area where like people would go and smoke weed and shit. And there would always be like guys who were a few years older than me. Like one of them had like a Venom shirt. One had like a COC shirt and they were like smoking pot or whatever. And like, we kind of try and be like, hey guys, I like Venom too. And that was the only place in school where you got to learn.
Hey Frankie, look what I got, some Exodus.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's cool to think there weren't any cool older kids that listened to good music in my high school or junior high for that matter. So it was a lonely path in the Poconos.
Oh yeah, the Poconos for sure. You're in the sticks, man, but it's beautiful out there.
It's grim and frostbitten and it's hilly, not quite mountainous. Opposites attract. What was your first impression, if we could get in a time machine, of the first time you heard that record?
I heard Pleasures of the Flesh first because that was the new album that there was like ads for, and I always used to buy like Power Metal and Metal Mania, not so much Rip or Circus because that was like for glam shit. But as much as I like glam now, when I was like 13 or 14, that was like strictly verboten. And so Places of the Flesh was the one that was the one I was looking for. And I knew that it was Kirk Hammett's old band, so on and so forth. And I really liked it a lot. I thought it was killer. And so on the strength of that, I bought Bonded by Blood. And it was like, holy shit. Like, I mean, not to take anything away from their other records, especially Pleasures and Fabulous Disaster, but it was like, this is like way more intense. Like it's beyond, maybe it's not as fast, like just pure tempo wise as maybe like Creator or Slayer, but it's more intense and it's somehow at least as vicious as those records. And it just, I don't know, dude, it's like never left rotation. Even when like a couple years later, I got totally into death metal and grindcore and I was like, thrash is lame, man, whatever. Because when you're 15, whatever you liked 2 years ago is stupid.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
That's how everybody is.
Yeah.
But there was a few records that always stayed. It was like Voivod, Creator, Sodom, and Bonded by Blood specifically, like never like went away. And there's just something about the viciousness of the record that, it speaks to anger's universal, especially when you're like an awkward, like 13-year-old kid, like full of hormones. Like I just changed to a new school and I was like, didn't really have any friends. My parents were getting divorced. It was like pretty tumultuous time.
Sounds like the plot of an 80s movie.
Right. And except in the 80s movie, I would have like, gotten into like a satanic cult or like gotten possessed by playing D&D or something like that.
Right.
That was where I was at in 87, 88. And that's when I was hearing this stuff. And that viciousness and anger just, it never really completely leaves you unless you're like a Buddhist monk or whatever. But it just struck such a chord with me. Paul Bailoff is so fucking mean and shitty and violent. And it's just like, yes, this is like everything that they say, like, oh, metal's horrible and it's satanic. And you're like, well, Iron Maiden's singing about, like, you know, Alexander the Great and like World War II history. Like, that's not that bad. Metallica is just saying, like, Master of Puppets is like, maybe don't get hooked on drugs. Like, this is like, I'm gonna fucking rape and murder your wife. You're like, yes, this is what I was warned about. This is what I was looking for, you know, the really bad stuff.
With that album especially, it has such attitude oozing from it. Bonded by Blood, it was about being a lifer in the world of heavy metal and thrash metal.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it's about. I love songs that are about metal. Like, it's something that people don't really do anymore, at least Americans don't do. But I love, like, you know, Heavy Metal Maniac and Pounding Metal by Exciter, or Metal Militia, Whiplash, and Bonded by Blood is one of those songs. It's just about going to a show and raging until you bleed, and then you keep raging. Like, that's like literally what it's about. And I love that idea of, you know, just being dedicated for life. And that's how I felt when I was a kid listening to this music, and when I started playing guitar. And, you know, to a large part, I think I still feel that way. You know, I still feel like, you know, this isn't just a casual thing. Like, if you're going to go this deep into it, it's a lifestyle from here on out, and it's never going to leave. Even if you maybe stop touring or you have kids or whatever, like, you still reserve a part of yourself for this thing, you know? And that's how I've always felt it.
And also one of my favorite songs, while we're on the topic of great songs about metal, on that record you have Metal Command.
I love it, man. It's just, you know, I always thought it has that line, a wall of sonic sound with amps turned up to 10. I always thought, like, well, no shit, sonic sound, all sound is sonic. That's fucking dumb. But then I realized when I got into the Priestback catalog a little bit later on, like in the mid-90s, there's that song on Sad Wings of Destiny. I forget which song it is, because comes a single sonic sound, and I was like, oh, so it's not. It was like Rob Halford said this dumb thing first, and then it's sort of like survived its way, was reincarnated from the 70s into the 80s by this song. And it's just like, you know, I love touring, and I love that feeling of like you go from town to town, and it's like you come in to an empty room, you pack the room out, everybody's raging, have a good time, you fucking get drunk, you get high, whatever. You know, back before I was married, maybe you got laid, maybe you tried to get laid, who knows? Then you go to the next town, and then it's like the next day all over again. You wake up, you're like, fuck, I'm like, shit, I think I'm gonna puke. And then by the end of the day, you're back on top of the world and fucking making noise and having a great time. Raging. It's awesome.
Sounds like the memories a heavy metal hard-ons are made of, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Heavy Metal Hard-On. That's the next Pounder single.
Sounds like Valhalla on Earth, indeed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the closest you can kind of get, you know, to that sort of ideal of like...
We go to town and leave a trail of death.
Right. And it is that sort of, you know, very stereotypical kind of adolescent male power fantasy. But that's okay, you know? I mean, as long as there's not like, you know... I mean, even as an adult, I mean, I think that's totally fine. As long as everybody involved is having a good fucking time. If you're going around beating people up or like, you know, raping people or creeping on chicks, like, that's not cool. But hey, going from place to place and fucking partying with your friends, and, you know, if you can get laid, great, you get laid. Maybe it's in the bathroom, maybe it's a dumpster behind, whatever, but who cares? And then you fucking go on and have the next party, and it fucking rules, you know?
And if you don't get laid, then tonight there'll be no love.
That's right. So a lot of nights are like that, especially playing death metal. You know, the heavier the music, usually the female percentage of the audience tends to shrivel accordingly. So, but hey, you know, you can't blame a guy for crying when I was, you know, in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah, you give it the old college try.
Yeah, why not?
And Matt, you're one hell of a guitarist. So musically, what did you take away from that album?
Well, thank you first. I would say what I really like about the record is that it balances these really heavy riffs, and, you know, everything feels like it's attacking. There's no like real like down tempo moments on the record. And so there's these really heavy, brutal riffs, you know, some of which are really simplistic, some are, you know, fairly complicated, but nothing crazy. But then the solos have like a really developed melodic sensibility, and there's that juxtaposition of the brutality of the riffs and the heaviness of the riffs with these sort of tasteful, melodic, European heavy metal influenced solos. And to me, I still contend that Rick and Gary are the best guitar team in metal. I think you couldn't make it in rock overall, because I think you have like Gary Moore and Scott Gorham and teams like that. But I think that they're better than like Adrian Smith and Dave Murray, or take your pick of whoever, because they both shred equally. Their solos are non-repetitive, and they make interesting harmonies. Like, I love Maiden. Like, on the other wall, it's like a whole wall of Maiden posters. However, harmonically, like, they kind of do the same thing again and again and again and again. They change it up, but it's basically like going to a burger restaurant. It's still a hamburger. Where Gary and Rick use a lot of different modes and stuff that's like melodic minor, harmonic minor, instead of just your typical like major and minor kind of thing. And it's really creative. And to hear something that's sophisticated and classy put into this really grimy, mean, aggressive thing, that's like a real nice balance. It's like sweet and spicy or something. It just kind of like, it gives them a chance to shine and to add something different to the music that would water it down otherwise, but it ends up being an embellishment. And I think that's something that we really strived to do in Exhumed in particular, is to have like really meaty, brutal, attacking riffs, and then there's space for doing something that's a lot more melodic without kind of diluting what the band is about. So I think that's before there was, maybe Cause of Death or Spiritual Healing or Heartwork, these really heavy albums with really melodic solos. There was Bonded by Blood, Pleasure of the Flesh, and the Fabulous Disaster, with those guys already doing it. It's really like game-changing guitar work.
Indeed. I'll tell you one thing that stands out to me. So we're going to sound like the heavy metal version of Car Talk for a second, but to all the non-musicians at home, the heathens and hellraisers that might be watching in the comfort of their own lairs. So you have songs, a big part of the thrash metal, speed metal sound is you have the palm muted double picking. So songs like Hell Awaits, or Celtic Frost, but what Exodus does is different, and they kick it right off the bat with Bonded by Blood, the opening track of the album, and throughout the rest of the album is with their guitar playing patterns. They have that little bit of space between the first pick and the rest of the sequence. They have the double down pick. So instead of going like da 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 da, they do dunk da 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 da, and that little extra space makes it so much heavier.
Yeah, it's got that sort of galloping, like really kinetic feel to the whole record. And not to sound like an old guy or whatever, but a lot of records in the 80s, the way they were produced, there just wasn't like the kick drum impact yet. The kick drum was kind of like woo, 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 not tuk, 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 tuk. And so the guitar picking, that was sort of the thing that was revolutionary about Kill 'Em All, is that the guitar picking was doing the job that the kick drum now does. Just that's providing that percussive edge. And with Exodus, with that little kind of thing that they do, they're giving like there's a groove, there's more of a groove to it. And they use a lot of like pull-offs, which is another thing that Exhumed does. They use a lot of pull-offs in their riffs, like pulling the open strings and bouncing up and down off not just the root note, off of, whether it's a third or a fourth or whatever. And it just creates interesting intervals that, that it just makes, that's like their sound. That's their thing. Slayer has the harmonies and their sort of like discordantly chromatic riffing. Exodus's thing is those little pull-offs and that gallop speed pick that's their little spice, and it's amazing. The record still hasn't gotten old yet, and it's 35 years old. Like, fuck.
As I think Paul Bailoff would say, it's heavier than time and older than shit.
Something like that, yeah. His stage banner, and Paul Bailoff is like one thing we haven't really touched on, but he's so crucial to making the album. He's objectively, from a musical standpoint, he is a terrible singer. He is not a good singer.
Singing, to call him a singer even is a compliment.
Right.
He's
He's a
kind of,
vocal.
yes, he's an aggressive talker.
There's just so much like bluster and bravado. You know, it's like, it's almost kind of like what Paul Di'Anno did on the early Maiden stuff, where the music is super melodic and obviously has all this room that Bruce Dickinson would exploit. Paul Di'Anno is a very limited singer. He's a rough and ready bar singer, but he comes in with swagger and it works. Well, Paul Bailoff makes, you know, Bruce Dickinson sound like, or makes Paul Di'Anno sound like Pavarotti, but he has that much more swagger, and he just comes in and he's like, fuck it. These are some notes, these are some yells. I'm just going to put them together in whatever order feels like it makes sense to me, and you're along for the ride. You're being like, and it goes with the lyrics, because the lyrics, so much of the lyrics are about subjecting people to violence. And he's doing that with his voice. He's subjecting you to sonic violence with his voice. He just doesn't give a shit about notes. He doesn't really give a shit even about cadence. You know, he's not really like strictly on rhythm. And that's why it's incredible. It's one of those things where 1 out of 100 times it's the best thing ever, and the other 99 it would stink, but it's the best thing in the fucking world.
Yeah, he sounds like, and I interviewed Gary Holt a few years ago, and I told this to him as well, but he kind of sounds like the Crypt Keeper.
Kind of, yes. He's like,
and the other half, it kind of sounds like he's asking a question.
Oh yeah, every line ends up on like, right. It's great. It's just, and the lyrics though, I'm not sure exactly who had the weight of the lyric writing, but I have to imagine that it's mostly Paul, considering how different their lyrics became after. The lyrics, however, are really great, and they're like very fun, and even though they're extremely crude and about all this evil shit, like there's like a joyfulness about them, that a youthfulness and a joyfulness, like he's like so into what he's writing and so into what he's delivering that it's just, like I said, it's one of those things where on paper it's maybe a bad idea, but in practice it's fucking fantastic.
I think it comes back to the attitude. They had a lot of attitude, and when you listen to those lyrics, when you read them, it sounds like it's coming from like something you would read in an adult comic book.
Yes. Right. That's just about violence. Well, we were going to write a story, but here's just like 5 pages of a guy like beating the shit out of people and like pulling their spines out and ripping off their faces. And you're like, perfect. I didn't need it's like porn. Like I don't need the plot anyway. It's fine. Just skip straight to it.
Another thing that album had that I think was one of the first thrash metal bands to really use triplets like that in Strike of the Beast and also in Piranha. Piranha. Dun, 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 dun. Of course, I think with thrash metal you had Battery by Metallica a year later, and also, of course, Raining Blood. But Exodus came out before then. I think, to my knowledge, I'm not a music historian by any means, but off the top of my head, I think they were one of the first thrash bands to really, really kick the triplets into overdrive.
I didn't really think about that, but that's actually a really good point. I'm trying to think of an earlier example, and I'm not really coming up with it.
It's like Iron Maiden, but that wasn't played at that type of speed or that delivery.
Right, and also they're just, the Exodus ones are even more, it's like the pre-Cannibal Corpse, on Eaten Back to Life, where it's all those little triplet gallops. And Exodus definitely, that's really cool. I hadn't even thought of that. 35 years later, and it's still got more to give. I mean, that's a pretty amazing record.
Still learning that lesson in violence, baby, with the Grim one. Happy to help.
It never ends.
So do you have a favorite song off that album?
I think my favorite song is Bonded by Blood. It's really tough. Like for a long time, I think I probably might have said Metal Command because it was kind of the underdog, metal-y song. But I think it's Bonded by Blood because, they played it when I've seen Exodus, like, I don't know. I mean, if not 100 times, like really close. Like when they got back together with Bailoff in '97, I think I saw him. I probably saw him like 15 to 18 times within like a year and a half. But when that starts and you hear that like plane taking off noise, and you're just like, oh shit, dude, here it comes. especially again, like being from the Bay and being old enough to sort of at least witness the tail end of that kind of movement of thrash metal. Then you knew, like, oh shit, like everybody starts pushing each other, and you're like fucking getting shoved around, and like it just comes in and explodes, and it's like it's just such a strong lead off track and such a strong statement. It gets me super psyched. I mean, there is no weak cut on the album. I'd be happy to hear any song any day, but that I think is the one that gets me the most ultimately juiced.
Yeah, I think that's why, in my opinion, it is the strongest debut album of all time for thrash metal, because not only did they fully have their voice and their plan of attack straight out of the bat, but every single song is solid. There's not really a lackluster. There's not even any tracks that are not as good. They're all solid tracks from beginning to end.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, not to take anything away from the other debut albums, but I mean, certainly like Killing Is My Business, you could skip, These Boots Are Made for Walking, would you be fine not hearing that? And personally, I mean, I'd be fine not hearing The Mechanics because it's just a song I've already heard played and recorded better by somebody else. And like, the first Anthrax record, like half of the record is kind of like, oh, this is another song, like it's cool. But I mean, I'd have a hard time telling you the difference between, off the top of my head, like what does Panic sound like? I don't know. There's like Howling Furies, Death Riders, Soldiers of Metal, maybe, and then there's some other songs, like I don't know what they are.
Yeah, Slayer, you can tell they were still finding their voice.
Because they're similar, Final Command and
Cryonics, Tormentor.
Cryonics is a great song. It's just not really like a Slayer song.
Yeah. Some of those songs sound like Judas Priest for Slayer. So they were still kind of growing into themselves. Of course, Black Magic and the Antichrist. That's the stuff that gets me going. But the other songs, they were still kind of growing in and discovering their sound. Whereas with Exodus, every single song was like a kick to the face.
Yeah, it's totally there. Yeah, like it sounds like a really nice version of Bloodlust by Venom. It's like, here, let's take this song, but now let's record it properly and play it properly. So it just sounds kind of boring, but it's a good song. But it's just and it's kind of safe sounding for Slayer, in those days. And again, I love Slayer and I love all those records. I've listened to them forever. So I'm not shitting on anybody. I'm just saying that's why this album to me is.
So growing up in the Bay Area, Matt, did you ever meet Paul Bailoff or any of the Exodus guys and hang out with them?
I didn't meet anybody. Well, actually, that's not totally true, but I didn't like meet them until like maybe trying to think what year Bailoff died. If that was 02.
It was a while ago.
One of those years. I met him then. Actually, Decapitator played, I want to say, Bailoff's second to last show or third to last show. I just saw some video of it. We played at this really tiny place called the Covered Wagon in San Francisco. They used to do a lot of metal shows. Our studio is probably, that I'm sitting in now, is probably bigger than that venue. And we didn't like hang out, but we met everybody. They were all super nice and everything. I did go to the Impact is Imminent in-store in 1990. For the Tower Records in Mountain View, California. And I remember, like, I was getting whatever signed by him. It's such a fucking shit, man. I'm like 14, and Zetra was like, oh, we're playing a bunch of songs from the heaviest Exodus album tonight. I was like, oh, you guys are playing a bunch of stuff from Blinded by Blood? And he's like, no, dude, Impact is Imminent, man. I was like, uh-huh. I was like, what a little fucking asshole.
I mean, he kind of set himself up for that, though. I mean, really.
Okay, so actually, and then I ended up, after Bailoff died, and then Zetra came back. They did the Tempo of the Damned record, and they were on tour in Europe, and we were on tour in Europe, and they, for some reason, they were on a really weird tour. There was like Grave was on that tour, and another death metal band, and I want to say it was Mortician, but it was a weird tour. And the day off, a bunch of people from that tour, including some of the Exodus guys, came to our show. And then our day off, we ended up going to their show and hanging out. And I remember that was kind of when I got to know them a little bit more. And after Zetro quit, they had a show in Mexico City, and Gary got my phone number from a buddy of his, and he called me up and was like, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend?" And I was like, "Nothing. What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, Zetro just quit, and we have the show in Mexico City in 2 days. You want to come like sing for the band?" He's like, "You're the first person I thought of that's local that already knows all the lyrics." So I was like, "Sure, okay." And so I went to Mexico City and did the gig with them, and we did like, I think we had like a sound check's worth of practice. I had all the lyrics taped to the stage. And I was like, I know the words. Like, as long as I have the sheet with the first word of the verse, I can get it. I just had to keep looking at Gary and Rick and Jack and being like, okay, how many times does this riff go? No, no, don't sing yet. Okay, all right, now sing. Got it. And so we did almost everything off Bonded. We did Metal Command, Bonded by Blood, Then There Were None, Exodus, Piranha. We didn't do No Love, and we might not have done Deliver Us to Evil. But anyway, it was like one of the funnest weekends of my life. And just went down and hung out with those guys. And then Gruesome toured with them a few years back in Europe. So they're always like super fucking nice dudes. Like, they're really cool, man.
Wow. Exodus karaoke with a live band. Sounds like a wet dream come true.
It really was. I was like, I asked Gary, I was like, I mean, you're the guy, like, this is your band, like, I'm just here to help out. Do you want me to announce the songs, or do you want to announce the songs? He's like, well, I'm going to say something at the beginning, and then you can just announce the songs. I was like, really? I can just announce the songs? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay. And I was like, I've always wanted to say this, but this next song, it ain't about no goldfish. Ain't about no tuna fish. It ain't about no trout. I did the whole thing with my voice. I was just like fucking little kid, man. It was insane.
And here we are now.
Right.
So, Matt, what's going on in your world as everyone is sequestered at home, hopefully surrounded by their axes and great metal albums and whatever recreational substances we have to pass the time? What have you been doing?
I've been just working on various music. I was working on a film score that actually I just found out this week is not going to be used, which I'm kind of weakened about. But I do have a lot of music in my back pocket, I guess, at this point. We also put the finishing touches a couple months ago on a split with two of my bands, Gruesome and Exhumed. And the original plan was that the split was coming out in June. It's still coming out on June 5th through Relapse Records, et cetera, et cetera. Plug. Bye. But we had booked a U.S. headlining tour, or an Exhumed headlining tour with Gruesome as direct support. And we had I think we had one date left that we were trying to fill. And then things started getting canceled, and we're like, should we? All right, we're going to push back the announcement. And then we kept pushing it back. And now, of course, there's nothing to announce because nothing's happening. So we decided to release the record anyway. It's 2 new Gruesome songs, 3 new Exhumed songs. It comes out on June 5th. It's a 10-inch. There's been 1 Gruesome song streaming so far. And, aside from that, fortunately for me, I have our studio here, and I'm now the only person that lives in town. So it's totally okay for me to shelter in place or quarantine myself here. When my wife gets tired of my shit, I got this fucking building with a recording studio and several guitars and my comic book collection. So I'm good to go,
Going out to the Rift Cave.